My name is Markus Törnqvist. I'm a software architect, or more of a consulting coder with a company called Codento based in Helsinki, Finland. And but that's not what the talk is about. It's about plugins. So how many of you use plugins in your regular lives? Oh, many more than in Helsinki. So how many have actually written any plugins for some software? Okay, that's cool. So I'll get to correct all my mistakes when we're done. So, okay. So what are plugins? For you who don't necessarily know, it's like code that extends or modifies software. And yeah, it's not a hard guess that it usually adds functionality. So that can mean like opening files that wouldn't otherwise be supported, modifying file type contents, and writing them out in some other format that wouldn't be necessarily supported. But they can do a bunch of other stuff, but this file thing is a very simple example, or a very common and usual one. And then other types of plugins, or plugins in general, they apply to things like text editors, graphics, audio, and not only files. So, well, I'm a heavy user of NeoVim and Vim in general, and that's a very plain editor when you just start it up without anything else going for it. So a lot of plugins are there to extend the user interface. And then like graphics, remember Winamp visualization plugins, a very good example as well. And I guess there are a bunch of like other pluggable editors around, but I don't personally care. So then when you think about it, you can think of dynamic libraries as a kind of plugin. So, and they often are distributed as dynamic libraries. So of course you can like do library hacks, like provide libraries, call dlopen and open up a symbol table, and that could be seen as a plugin mechanism, but that's usually for replacing functionality, like you want fsync to be a no-op or something like that. That's when you do it, but still, like even the old web server Apache, does anyone still use Apache? Is that a thing? Oh, we have some old geezers in the audience. Yeah, most people don't know Apache exists anymore, but it had DSOs, dynamic shared objects, for like functionality within the Apache web server. So that's a thing, and like Windows DLLs. So why do I care about this? So I've always been interested in messing around with code, like figuring out what it can actually do. So one of the first things I did in Python was around 2003. It was a wiki implementation called Vicky. I don't know if the screenshot's visible, but October 21st, 2003 was implemented in CGI. Do you guys remember CGI? Like the old school? Yeah, that's what it was. So it had some like a vague notion of plugins, but never really made it into a huge public thing. I mean, GitHub wasn't around or anything back then. I just put it up somewhere on a server where I hosted my blog at the time, and a couple of friends of mine from IRC, they did what you'd expect them to do for the content of the wiki, and then I took it down eventually. So that's what happened. And the only plugin I ever like really did that was worth anything, I did it in C# for PowerPoint. So that's not very Python or very open source, but it paid the cost of living for a while. So when are plugins cool? So they keep your core clean. So modular design, that's a good thing to go with. And even if you have like a huge monolithic thing, you probably want to have some kind of modularity in there. This allows you to also like test all the composable components separately, and then maybe even in parallel. And this is the kind of stuff that Python's really good with. So, and then you can crowdsource some functionality. Okay, don't go extreme with it. Don't do build it and they will come kind of thing, because if you expect the crowds to do your work for you, they won't even show up. So you build it and they'll be like meh. So that's not going to work out. But if you have something that's really cool and it feels like it's catching fire, and then you have plugin support there, if it's relevant, then people might actually get interested and do things. And of course, a lot of commercial applications have commercial plugins as well, like, okay, sure, the C# thing I did, that's one thing, but this is maybe not super relevant in open source, but it's a thing. So what do they look like? I'm going to kick this off with GIMP Python, which is for the GNU image manipulation program. So the way these work is that they are run as scripts, so you have a main function at the end, which is called, but it's not like super Pythonic. You import star. No one likes to import star. And then there's this huge register function that needs to be called that registers it in gimp.pdb, which is the internal plugin database for it. And it's a bit of bad mojo. And there's something called GIMP plugin that I don't know if it like actually exists. There were some hints somewhere, like in the dark corners of the internet, that it would exist, but I'm not really sure what that's about. But apparently it makes it more object-oriented, so it wraps into a class and you execute that. But I'd say that this GIMP foo stuff is more about the file content manipulation, and GIMP plugin would be like more relevant to adjusting the UI of GIMP. And the GIMP UI is very controversial, so maybe that's a good thing to have around someday. But yeah, register. So let's see now. I almost have a hard time seeing this myself here on my little screen here, but there's a simple plugin which actually just prints out the message "Hello World." I claim no responsibility for the styling of this. These are pretty much taken as is from the online examples. Some of them I cleaned up just a bit but to make them fit here, but yeah. So maybe the cool thing to see is that the register is huge and magical, and that's a kind of bad mojo. So some internal name, a verbose name description, license, and a bunch of stuff that doesn't make any sense, like the two lists at the end. So this is why Python 3 and the star keyword argument stuff is cool. It makes it more obvious. This is like using setup.py and setup tools. And a show of hands, who loves the setup tools setup stuff with its huge signatures and everything? Nope. Yeah. So another one also related to graphics, it's Inkscape, the vector graphics program that supports Python plugins as well. And these are also scripts that are executed. So you import Inkex, and there's an XML kind of registration for them, and it uses option parser for the API. And option parser, show of hands, who wants to do all their command line argument parsing by building small objects and joining them together? Nope. Yeah. Docopt's way cooler. And yeah, one thing that should be said about this, I should have brought it up before, but these are not contained in any way, so you can do whatever you want with the script. So this makes them very unsafe by nature, so it's worth looking into what you're going to execute if it's not a trusted source you get it from. So this isn't like super exciting, except maybe the part about XML, but again, it's a vector graphics program. It deals in SVG, so maybe XML is just a natural fit for it. So let's see what it looks like. So you have a class, that's cool, and then it actually has like super helpful comments. This is one of the nice things about Inkscape, that the examples are well commented. So that's how the class starts off with, by setting up the options and stuff. And then you have this effect method that's like the bulk of the code. There are some comments about many ways of doing things like SVG get and SVG attrib there. That's not how you want to do Python, but I think this is actually wrapping LXML or some other XML library that gives you different ways of doing things. So that's probably it. And then here's the actual manipulation part. So looks at an element of the SVG and does stuff there, adds some text, and then in the end you create an instance of the class and make it so. So these are the two that I've actually done some stuff in GIMP and Inkscape for fun. Blender I have not done personally, but it looks really, really cool. So there used to be a module named Blender that looked really auto-generated, like someone took the original C code or something. It had nothing to do with PEP8, and it was somewhat awful. But the new one, BPY, that's kind of cool. So it doesn't do scripts. It has clean imports. It has a utility for registering that's clean, and what it does is it exposes the state of the world, a bit like OpenGL. So you have these classes, and then you poke at the state of Blender, and then you can just like do if name equals main stuff for testing. So what's here? We have something called make tetrahedron in Python, and that's like pretty cool. It doesn't do anything with the UI. It just like you'd have to invoke this through a like keyboard shortcut at this point. And Blender has an excellent tutorial on where to go from here, but it's pretty much what you'd expect. Like you invoke it, and then you do stuff, and then you link the new object to the like objects in the scene in the context. So I'm actually happy with what this looks like. But it also has a script style approach, and this is for doing file I/O. So I think this is like some object format in ASCII that's not completely uncommon, and this is registered in the file selector. So it says export there, and that means that it's actually going to be in export, but otherwise it gets the stuff from the scene, gets the objects there, and writes stuff out. So what do we have next? So one way of distributing and doing these are egg entry points. So you can do a lot with them, and I'm not going to go too deeply into this specifically because the next slide is going to be about Stevedore, which is OpenStack's solution for this, and I just read about it. I haven't done this personally, but it looks like a very good design and very well documented. So that's cool. So you have these base classes from ABC, and you write pretty much like simple stubs and extend them, and then you use the setup tools entry points to make them into plugins. And Stevedore has different types of loaders for different types of plugins, like drivers, which they're like SQL Alchemy, so you have a single name for them and they go to a single place, or like hooks for, well, anything that looks like a signal, maybe in Django. So you give it a name, but then like anyone can interact with it, and then extensions, which they have many names and many entries, so they're a bit like maybe Django apps or track plugins, which I'll get to in a moment. But this is pretty clean and modern Python already in the examples. It uses 6.4 compatibility and ABC meta, all of that stuff, and yeah. So there's a lot more code in the setup tools part for this, but this is a format where it takes a dictionary and pushes out lines, and it yields them instead of returning, and I like it. It's got a good vibe to it. So then track. Do you guys remember or know track? Hands up, who uses track? Hell yeah. Track's great. I'm surprised it's still in active development. When we started going to Scrum and whatever, all the Scrum plugins for track were pretty bad, so I looked into the ones that existed and tried to hack my way around, like trying to shoehorn track to fit that model, but didn't really work out, so I haven't used track in almost a decade, but still have a spot for it in my heart. So it has a very interesting way of dealing with plugins. So it's got the concept of components. They're singletons, they're like instantiated only once, and then they hang around. And then it has these interfaces which you declare extension points for, and this will probably make more sense when we get to the code example, but other components connect through these extension points to these defined interfaces. And like any other plugin, it's worth noting that you gotta have the same function signatures for them, or they have to be compatible in some way, or you break the contract and this will never work. So here we have like an interface class iToDo observer, and then a component to-do list, and there you can see that there's observers is extension point for iToDo observer in the class, and it has its internal structure for to-dos and a bit of assert, and then when you add something to your to-do list, it goes through the observers and calls them. So there's not a lot to like the to-do added in the iToDo observer. It's more like a bit like a superclass, or a kind of like a callbacky thing, but closer to a superclass. So then another component, to-do printer, it implements iToDo observer, and that's where you actually have the meat of the code. So whenever you add something to your to-do list, like you need a component manager, and then the to-do list will use that. But whenever you add stuff to your to-do list this way, it prints it out. And yeah, so there's a couple of moving parts, but there's something cool about this design. So time travel time, the 2003, what was Vicky? So I had a very weird idea of what Python should look like. I had no idea Pep8 existed, and I was a kid, but it was more fun to do it than many other things. So let's take a look at what I did there. So it globs plugins, and I used to do comments as a double quoted strings, because that was possible to do. What, 5 minutes remaining? Yeah. So here I'm gonna do the coding part. This is NeoVim with a plugin for this, and now I need to improvise real quick to see what's the most relevant thing here to go through. Maybe I'll just skip to the ending, because apparently time is not on our side today. Okay, maybe I don't even have time to talk about the PyQt stuff, because this is very, very Qt specific. One thing I'll say is that for exception handling, if you can use decorators are really cool, because you can just tie back to the Qt system of reporting them. That's nice. The plugin loading, that's pretty much the same basic idea as in 2003, but it's tied to a refresh button. So whenever you drop in a new plugin, you can refresh it, and then it just like looks for it all over the place. And otherwise, this is pretty much boilerplate. The UI comes off of XML Qt's XML definition that you can do with the Qt creator. That's really cool. So okay, so we have the editor. This is not on par with Vim. This is actually the worst editor probably known to exist, but you can do things here like ZSHRC. I can open it up. It did. I can do foo and use the output, the reverse output plugin. Now there's no reporting that it flushed it to disk, but it did. So this is my glorious pluggable editor. So now let's see if I can remember the API for the plugins without having gone through the code. So this will probably go horribly wrong somehow, but let's, yeah. What I actually want is, yes, a new file. So from plugins, import plugin class upper inherits from plugin, and then def, hold on. Save. It takes the window, the file name, the contents, and then with open. Is the text too small? Is that what you're saying? Oh, great. I don't know how to increase the font size in Qt. Plus, no. Okay, if I start changing resolutions, that'll take all the time we have. So I'm going to read it out loud. With open n, write as f write C upper, I think. Okay, so now I think I can save it with the preferably the plain plugin and refresh the list. Didn't show up, so where did I make a mess of things? Oh, it needs the name. Yeah, one of the features of my glorious editor here is that it needs a name, otherwise it won't be considered a valid thing. And then file exists, this is the exception handler, so I need to, let's just call it upper 2 in the name as well to be as safe as possible. Plain, okay. Refresh the plugins, cool, we got something. And then use the plugin to say, takes 3%. Oh, I made the same mistake last time last time I had this talk. I forgot self there. So, of course, never forget yourself. Upper 3. So, and then another plain output. Another refresh, and let's see. What did I plug in? I needed upper. Doesn't matter though, it's just a name. It exists? What? No, it doesn't. Upper foo. Okay, and then I open the upper foo file and it's turned into capital letters. So you can actually write a plugin. And just write a plugin and mess around with the actual plugin and do things like this. And this is why I think it's cool. So.